Uh, I want to start this by thanking those who made this possible. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the help of my friends, family, and the wonderful people here at Epiphany. I know now that I've always been a child of God, but it wasn't until recently that I became a true believer and follower of Him. His many teachings speak to me, the things I learned both inside and outside of church. The one thing that always stood out to me was how we can be reborn in Christ, to become better than who we are. I am so glad to say that I can attest to this being true, as I look at how God has shown Himself in my life and how I've grown because of it. Growing up my relationship with God and the church was a very difficult and troubled one. This was due to one of the churches I grew up in, Fountain of Life, as there were times they used God's words to harm and punish. And it was through this that I learned to be fearful of God and feel shame in His presence. When I was a child, I remember there being times where I used to pray nearly every day and multiple times a day. I wasn't doing this out of genuine devotion towards God, however. Instead, it was an action done more out of obligation. I came to believe that I was riddled with sin and that I had to do everything I could to make up for it, to save myself from the fate of eternal damnation. Yet at the same time, I was taught that nothing would ever be enough. I felt abandoned by Him when I didn't feel His presence at my old church. I used to talk so much about growing up. I would pray so consistently, yet I never felt as if I got an answer in return. And it caused me to have feelings of guilt and shame, which drove me away from God to such a significant degree to where I denounced Him and even at times detested Him in my early teenage years. It wasn't until I met Nolan and joined Epiphany that I began to truly understand what it meant to feel God's presence and love. When I first started attending church here, I felt like an outsider due to my past experiences and my deteriorated relationship with God. I felt so far removed from Him, so ashamed for being so, that I would feel as if I was an intruder in here. I would watch a congregation devote themselves to Him every day, see their enjoyment and love in their actions, and felt as if I was intruding upon something I was never meant to see. Despite this, I have been told time and time again that I am welcomed here and that I am accepted as I am here. This wasn't done by just Nolan and Arlene alone. I was shown that this was true through the congregation, everybody in here, with people especially like Will and Ashley, and of course through Pastor as well. The longer I went to Epiphany, the more I could feel my relationship with God beginning to change for the better and grow into what it is today. At first, it was a passive interest, but it steadily grew over time as I actually sat down and listened to what was being said in the sermons every service. Though it was difficult for me to let go of the fearsome fire and brimstone image of God that had been instilled in me since my youth, it is through attending service here at Epiphany that I grew to know more of His merciful side, and I have experienced His forgiveness and patience. And as I do things like partaking in communion and affirming my baptism, it makes me feel closer to God. It is through this church that I feel as if I am no longer alone, and that is not through just the people here in the congregation and those I love. I genuinely believe that I feel God's presence when I do things like partake in communion and pray.